Hey, and this is Dustin Thomas, and you're watching the Wrestling Epicenter.
You're listening to Interactive Wrestling Radio, featuring the Interactive Interview, courtesy of WrestlingEpicenter.com.
This is the Luchasaurus, and I'm in the Wrestling Epicenter. Yeah. Rah.
Welcome, everybody, to another edition of Interactive Wrestling Radio. My name is James Walsh, and joining me on the Newsmaker line for a old-time segment like we used to do back in the day to talk a little bit about wrestling in an abbreviated form is Mr. Patrick Kelly. Mr. Kelly, are you with me?
I'm with you, James. How have you been, man?
Good. It's been a long time since we recorded one of these things. For those who don't know, we still talk fairly often over the phone, and basically should be recording them because they're funny shit. We really go off of off the cuff. The other day, we somehow ended up going from talking about AEW Fight for the Fallen to talking about the Saved by the Bell made-for-TV movies.
I think you and I both suffer from attention deficit disorder, and you put two of us together on the phone, and it gets weird.
It does. The thing is, and I bow to your greater wisdom. You're better at it than I am, but you have a lot of wisdom when it comes to pop culture. And I like my random offbeat stuff that I like a Saved by the Bell made-for-TV movie. Who the hell remembers these? But I do.
Okay, you say that like they made more than one. I only remember the one where Zach and Kelly got married.
They did a summer one as well.
Okay.
I think it was kind of to test the waters to see if the abysmal college years show would get over.
Mm.
Which reminds me, I had an idea the other night that they should bring in the actress who played Miss Bliss on Saved by the Bell to be Alexa Bliss's mother.
Haley Mills.
Yeah, hey, there you go, Haley Mills. There you go. She was the original Parent Trap, the real Parent Trap.
Yes, indeed.
I didn't like the remake.
I don't remember the remake.
I think it was was it Lindsay Lohan? I think it was Lindsay Lohan.
I think that was her first movie.
There you go.
It might have been, if it wasn't her first movie, it was the first one that got her noticed.
There you go, exactly. So here we are. We're already off topic. This week we're going to be joined by Dustin Thomas. Dustin Thomas is the wrestler. I don't know how you would phrase it. He is the guy who does not have legs, who was in the AEW Double or Nothing Casino Battle Royal, and really made a name for himself, even though Jim Cornette didn't seem to really like the Battle Royal or, quite frankly, the involvement of Dustin Thomas. So we talk a little bit about that. Great interview with a good guy, and I wish him nothing but the best. You know, I've got my challenges physically when it comes to my vision and all that, and anytime I see somebody with a physical disability that goes out there and really, you know, redefines the rules of what they're capable of, what we're capable of, that's pretty cool to me. So I encourage everybody to check out Dustin Thomas. And he is, going to be doing a lot of stuff coming up. So keep an eye out for Dustin Thomas. He's definitely rewriting the rules of what a wrestler can do with his condition. So it's pretty impressive.
All right, yeah, that sounds great, man.
All right, so I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the changes in wrestling because we haven't done one of these in a while. And frankly, we haven't done one since AEW really was a thing. So let's talk a little bit about the birth of AEW.
Let's do that. Well, it's a new wrestling company that, unlike other wrestling companies that have come up since the demise of ECW and especially WCW, this company is poised to be like a major national promotion. It's got the TV deal with TNT, and they've got very rich backers in the Khan family, and it seems like, I don't want to say second coming of WCW, but it seems like we're finally getting a wrestling company on par with something that can potentially match WWE.
I think that's a fair assessment. And a lot of people hear me say, oh, it's like WCW. And they go, well, we've gone back in time. That's a bad thing. This, that, or the other. I don't mean it that way. I think it's just the fact that it is a high-quality, highly produced program. I mean, even Fyter Fest and Fight for the Fallen, which for those WWE fans reveling in the fact that they weren't, as dynamic as Double or Nothing, those were never intended to be as dynamic as Double or Nothing. They were basically spot shows that we got to watch for free, and I secretly wonder if it was so the production crew could get comfortable with their own settings, that we even got a chance to see them.
Yeah, absolutely. Those two shows were like tests, and I pretty much said after Double or Nothing, the next big one is All Out. That's the one I'm waiting for, and anything that comes in between is just kind of, whetting the appetite and helping to set the stage and hopefully iron out.
And keeping themselves current, too.
Sure, yeah. Well, I mean, what killed Lucha Underground, they would go on their season hiatuses, and then they'd disappear for 3, 4.
Right, and I loved Lucha Underground. That was one of my favorite brands once you finally convinced me to watch it. And then, unfortunately, it seems like mid-season 3, when they had that unscheduled hiatus, that seemed to be kind of the beginning of the end of the brand.
Yeah.
They were clearly no longer the priority of El Rey.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it. They just couldn't – they would get momentum, and then they just couldn't maintain it. And I think the hiatus has had a big issue with that because, the wrestlers weren't working, and they went off and got spots elsewhere. So, Pentagon and Phoenix, a bunch of other guys all got jobs elsewhere.
Well, I mean, yeah. Right, exactly. So, back on AEW, when I say that it's like the second coming of WCW, some people try to make it out like it's a negative thing. It really isn't. I'm excited for it. It's a high-quality, highly produced wrestling show. They do their own style. And as we found out on Raw, you can't put 4 women in a match without a heat story in WWE in the way that they're set up and expect the crowd to react positively to it. What AEW can do right now is that they have a hungry audience that's hungry to see wrestling. They could do what they did. So WWE, I really do believe this, and nobody else is giving you this view, by the way. But the match that got booed off of Raw, the Alexa Bliss, it was Alexa Bliss, Tamina Snuka, Natalya, and I can't remember who else.
And Naomi.
Carmella and Naomi. There you go. Got booed out of the building. The chance, instead of "this is awesome," clap, 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 it was "this is awful." Yeah. So, bottom line is, I've heard people describe WWE as the McDonald's of wrestling. That it's the most readily available, easiest to consume, but sometimes hardest to digest wrestling that there is out there.
And that match you just mentioned,
there you go.
Little advice to Alexa Bliss.
And much like
she's posted something on Twitter, which Twitter, by the way, worst thing that ever happened to famous people. They need to train people how to use Twitter responsibly because some people just say really off the wall stupid things. But Alexa responded on Twitter to the crowd reaction, said something to the effect of disrespectful and yada yada yada, all this other stuff. And I was like, Alexa, I take it from somebody like me who's been watching this stuff for literally decades, longer than Alexa's been alive. If that's the most hostile a crowd ever gets towards you, you should be counting your blessings. Talk to Roman Reigns and John Cena about what a hostile crowd can do to you. Talk to The Rock. Talk to Hulk Hogan. Talk to literally anybody who was around in the golden age from the 60s and the 70s where the heels basically feared for their lives. If a crowd not responding the way you want them to is the worst thing that ever happened to you in wrestling, you should count your blessings because that's really not so bad.
Absolutely not. And especially for the women, considering what they've had to contend with the creepos that was in the Ring of Honor crowd, the jerk who tried to abduct Scarlett Bordeaux and AAA. I mean, there's been some things that have happened. a guy reached over the guardrail when Scarlett was leaning up against the rail and tried to pull her up over the rail.
See, that's terrible.
Yeah.
Did you think he was
Yeah,
gonna
and then
get
there
away
was
with
another
it?
one that swatted it. Well, I'll tell you what, she's dating Killer Cross. Let me ask you this. As attractive as Scarlett may be, would you chance that to potentially end up on the back end of a fist
let me
from
say this.
Killer Cross? Not a
people
chance.
talk about like the size of the wrestlers today, and they aren't as big as they used to be, and blah blah blah. They're not as intimidating. Killer Cross is one of the few men in modern day wrestling that legitimately terrifies me.
I interviewed him. And I remember when we started, he had this tone about him. When do we begin? Oh, wait, okay, that's scary as fuck. You're probably not even trying to be, but Jesus Christ. And then he did the liner for us at the end. He said, "This is Killer Cross." And you're listening to, what the fuck is it called again? Yeah, I don't know why, but I almost used that one instead of the actual one where he gets the name right because it was just so perfect. Yeah. So anyway, what were we talking about? So yeah, that's AEW. It's coming up to TNT this October. Can't wait to see it. And yes, I mean, I'm fully on board. I am all in, if you will, on AEW, at least cautiously so, but I am definitely rooting for their success, that's for certain.
I think you and I were talking about Fight for the Fall and some of the timing issues and matches going too long and leading to kind of a messed up finish, a little bit of a messed up finish, but they worked that stuff out and build up the roster a little bit more. They could have sky's the limit. And I wish them all the best because I'm always on the lookout for new wrestling, and this is something that's legitimately exciting.
Something I talked about, and I'm name dropping like crazy, with Disco Inferno months ago, is that they cannot present New Japan Pro Wrestling on American TV and expect it to be huge. They can't just do matches, is what I mean by that. And I got a glimpse of that with the super bad Sabian versus Hangman Page match, where Hangman Page should have gone over. He clearly is the guy that should go over because he's challenging for the world title. Very possibly will be their first world champion. Sabian had a fairly lackluster match on the pre-show of Double or Nothing. Nothing against Sabian, but that match should have been 5 minutes long, fairly convincing for Hangman Page to go over. The fact it went 19 minutes, nobody in their right mind is going to say, oh, well, he almost took Adam Page to the limit, and he went 19 minutes with them. Nobody's going to remember that. If he would have gotten a couple of good spots in, that would have been just as good as having a 19-minute match, but had it in 5, and it would have probably even been more well-received. That's going to be their struggle, I think, is making sure that what they do is fit for mass consumption and not just for the audience that is coming over from New Japan. You got to appeal to now the TNT audience, the ones who would really be watching NBA, maybe even the WCW fans who never joined Impact, never came on board. Because remember, when WCW got sold, those viewers didn't become WWE viewers. Yeah. They just stopped watching wrestling. Now, it goes back a long time now. That's a generation ago now, 19 years, 18 years. But they're still out there, at least a lot of them are, and I think that there's a lot of new fans to be had. You just got to make sure that you do present something, at least if it's not McDonald's, then something that could appeal to the fast food eating audience.
That we saw there with the Hangman Page Kip Sabian match, that's part of the kind of the mindset of wrestling today that I wish we could kind of get past, the whole chasing star ratings. And the only way to get any kind of praise in this business is to get those star ratings, man. And the only way to get star ratings is to have a long and athletic match. And that's just not the case. Telling stories and having matches that make sense and having angles and situations and feuds and things like that's what makes wrestling interesting. Promos, stories, that stuff and getting me to care about the match before the bell even rings. That's the stuff that really needs to be the focus.
All right, so we got wrestling on TNT, and Eric Bischoff and Paul Heyman are in charge of wrestling programs. So it really is 1999.
I'd seen in a dog's age when I thought, all right, so Vince McMahon has turned at least some control of his two main shows over to the guy that ran ECW and the guy that ran WCW. What world are we living in?
Pretty crazy. We're living in an AEW-driven world where I really do believe Vince McMahon wanted to get the two guys that he feared the most becoming part of AEW to give jobs to them so they wouldn't do that, to placate them, to get them on his side so they weren't working for the other side. Because Bischoff is the only guy that ever successfully defeated him for any period of time. And Paul Heyman created the underground movement, very reminiscent in some ways with ECW and AEW to what we're seeing in AEW, where you have this underbelly, these renegade spirit that's kind of underneath, kind of running the ship of wrestling in some extent. That's what I think that he didn't want to see Paul Heyman become part of. And Bischoff, with his know-how and ability to, how should I say, work people and work office staff and work
television
executives the way that he did. Because Bischoff's draw wasn't necessarily his TV show production, as well as the ability to deal with executives, was Bischoff's benefit. For those who don't get that because you're a freaking idiot, true, he probably wasn't the creative genius that maybe Paul Heyman is or was, but he did have those benefits, those business acumen, that made him successful. So do not discredit what Bischoff could do with the show that's now going on to Fox for WWE, especially with Vince's attention at least somewhat deterred by the XFL.
The thing that interests me the most is, okay, how much control is Vince really going to give Heyman and Bischoff over these two programs? Because I can guarantee you, knowing what I know about both guys, Heyman is going to want to shake things up and do major things to change it. And Bischoff, I can tell you day one that he gets in there, he's going to want to change the entire look of SmackDown. Like, I guarantee you he's already, like, suggesting, like, a new way to shoot the show, a new way to present the show, new graphics, new staging, new everything. And I'm sure Bischoff has had, if he, at the very least, he's brought it up in some of the meetings he's had, I'm sure.
I'm sure he has. He's got a different approach. They're different kind of geniuses. Each of them have their own genius level. And I'm not a big fan of Paul Heyman, by the way, but I will accept the fact that he was the creative and revolutionary force behind ECW. So that was big. And then Bischoff ran WCW. Again, the only company to ever beat WWE for any period of time. So people need to realize that they do have their own strong points and weaknesses. Because maybe Bischoff wasn't a great creative mind, but he was a better creative mind than Paul Heyman was a businessman.
Oh, sure. Well, I don't think you're going to have to worry about that.
Remember, ECW didn't close because there was nobody coming to the shows. ECW closed because Paul Heyman had no idea how to run a business.
I don't think this is going to give him that much control where he's actually, like, controlling the money.
No. Oh, of course not. That's going to be Vince, and there's a machine that's running that whole thing. So, anyway, so big changes in wrestling. I'm so excited to see it. Quick thoughts, final thoughts here on Ring of Honor and Impact Wrestling. I love Ring of Honor. I still love their show. I still think they're going to put on a great show. I'm so happy for Matt Taven to be world champion. He still is one of the best in the world. I just think they need to find a way to get the momentum back a little bit after G1 Supercard kind of was their zenith, and then they kind of have dropped off a bit. They need to find a way to pick up the ball and start running with it again.
Cody and the Bucks, and they're still working to try and fill that void. Because even the G1 Supercard, I mean, that show sold out because of those guys, and nobody can convince me otherwise. So that's a pretty tough void to fill, but Ring of Honor has been really good about that. When they lose guys, they always have, like, the next generation coming up. And I think it's just a matter of finding that next thing. Like when Samoa Joe left in 2005, 2006, they had guys waiting in the wings to eventually be built up, and that's where, like, I think Nigel McGuinness kind of came into his own. Daniel Bryan, Bryan Danielson back then, he started getting big runs with the title. So, you know, they've always got, like, new things waiting in the wings, and Ring of Honor's typically been pretty good about that.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of people been negative about them, but I have zero doubt that they'll figure it out. All right, and finally, Impact Wrestling. I really loved Slammiversary. I think it was a great show. I think that if you haven't seen it, and the numbers would imply that you probably haven't, how many people saw Slammiversary, find a way to watch it. Get it on Fight TV. If it's available on Impact Plus, get it. It's already available for pre-order on ImpactWrestling.com. Get a hold of a copy of this show, especially for that main event. By the way, the guy who was in the main event was on our show to promote that show. And the one he wrestled, Tessa Blanchard, was on our show to promote Homecoming. So we've had both of these huge stars on the show in the past 6 months. So incredibly flattered that to be able to say that. And what they did was awesome. So if you haven't seen Tessa Blanchard and Sami Callihan,
yeah, I thought the match went very, very
crap.
well. I actually liked most of the matches on the show. I thought it was, like you, I thought top to bottom, it was one of the most enjoyable pay-per-views I've seen all year. But yeah, that main event was really something special, I thought.
Absolutely. Impact will be fine. There's rumors they're going to end up on Access TV. I don't know if that's true or not. I have zero to substantiate it. Just the rumors that I've read, which everybody else has read. But I hope it's true because Access seems like a good fit for them. And I'll tell you what. You've got Brian Johnson of AC/DC is going to be hosting a talk show on Access TV. If you put Brian Johnson on Sunday night, Impact on Friday night, and WOW and NJPW on Saturday night, I might not have to change my TV channel. It might just stay on Access TV from Friday to Sunday on non-football season. You know what I mean?
It's like, oh, I've got Lucha Underground, I've got Godzilla movies, I got horror movies. This channel is everything for me.
All right, dude. Well, it's been a pleasure doing a little bit of wrestling talk with you. I don't usually get to offer an opinion. For those who are wondering why, by the way, I got too opinionated, and I think I was being too negative on especially WWE. And I'm not anti-WWE. I just think that, especially at that time, I was being so negative that I was being a detriment to myself. So I just thought, you know what? I'm going to do interviews with guys. I love doing the interviews with the guys, and that'll be it. That's all I'm going to do. But this interview kind of opened itself up for a intro segment. This interview, by the way, the one with Dustin Thomas, which is about to premiere in just a few seconds.
No problem, man.
Pat,
Anytime
again,
you need
thank
me
you
to
for
do
doing
something like
this
I'm
with me
always
this week.
just a phone call away.
All right, and for all of you out there in Facebook and YouTube and WrestlingEpicenter.com land, enjoy the interview with Dustin Thomas, and thank you for listening. Available now in the archives at interactivewrestlingradio.com. It's our exclusive interview with the American Dream, Dusty Rhodes.
So no, we respect each other in the ring and what we've done, and there's a respect there. And even though if he would say something bad, he kept coming back to that respect thing. People had told me, but there's a respect there. But it's business. Business is business with me and him.
This classic 2005 interview can be heard at WrestlingEpicenter.com and InteractiveWrestlingRadio.com. Welcome back to Interactive Wrestling Radio. On the Newsmaker line with me right now is one of the most inspirational stories in recent wrestling memory. He is the gentleman we all saw at AEW Double or Nothing in the Battle Royal. He is Dustin Thomas. Mr. Thomas, are you with me?
Yeah, hey, thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you, man. So I got to ask you, I did you ever think that you would be the most inspirational story of 2019, as many are dubbing you right now?
No, definitely not.
How did this end up coming to be? How did you decide that, I want to become a professional wrestler?
I always was a fan of it growing up, and I always wanted to give it a shot. And once I was done with college, I figured, now is better than ever.
Kind of an interesting question for you. What did you study in college?
Law.
Law. Okay, cool. Because it's weird because we had, leading into the Battle Royal, we had Luchasaurus, who was also in there, and we talked about his college degree, which took a lot of people by surprise. I think they thought he was just a big dumb animal, but he's really incredibly intelligent guy.
Yeah.
All right. So I'm going to be blunt with you. I have a vision disability, and technically I'm legally blind, and not the same thing of what you deal with. I'm not going to even try to put myself on that, but I know that I hate that a lot of times that defines me, and people want to make it define me. Is that something that bothers you at all? That the what you deal with on a daily basis is a lot of times the first thing people mention when they mention you?
No. I mean, I've lived my whole life like this, so for it to bother me at this point would be just holding a grudge about something I can't fix. So, I mean, we all have problems, and mine just happens to be visible.
Very good, very good. Now, what happened? Like, what is the physical, medical reason that this that you have this situation going on?
I was born with a condition called spinal dysgenesis, and at 3, my parents decided it'd be best to just get my my legs amputated from the knee down, and so it's all I've ever known. So it's never really truly affected me.
What is it about pro wrestling? Because it's the really cool thing. If you really ever are in a crowd just watching a wrestling event, you'll have a doctor sitting next to you. You'll have a guy sitting next to you with obvious, issues, and we all conglomerate on this wonderful thing that is wrestling. What about wrestling kind of speaks to all of us Island of Misfit Toys?
It allows you to, well, first off, entertain people, and entertainment's important to let people just escape their realities and stuff for at least a few hours, which is important, and then inspire people on a mass level, which I'm more than happy to do.
Very cool, and that is one of the best parts of watching you, is that you definitely are inspirational. When I decided that this is what I want to do, and this isn't the only thing I do, much like you, I also went to college first, but I started doing the site while I was in college, and I'm, 38 now, going to be 38 now. But when I first told my parents, I want to do something in wrestling, my sister came in the room and said, "Well, I'm glad Grandma's gone, because she'd would she'd die if she heard you say that." What did your family think when they heard you say that you were going to get involved in this crazy, dangerous world?
I mean, they were supportive. Nothing they knew I was crazy, so it didn't really matter what I was going to do it regardless of what they said. So it didn't really matter. So they were supportive.
So watching you in the ring, most of your offense you do with such incredible upper body strength. Obviously, I heard the commentary on Joey Janela's show, and they say, well, I guess it's from working with the wheelchair, but you must lift quite a bit of weight to be able to literally make up for the fact, that you're wrestling guys with 2 legs with none.
Yeah, I think that's a misconception with people. I work out daily. It's not. I am an actual athlete. It's not. I barely use that wheelchair. It really is just for show. I work out daily. I mean, to get my athleticism and my body strength is something I've worked on.
All right. So I mentioned the Joey Janela show, and that seemed to be really the one that kind of springboarded you towards AEW. But thoughts on how big that was for you and your awareness in the wrestling world, the Joey Janela spring breakout match against Tony Depper?
Yeah, so it's kind of the reason I'm even known, real, because I mean, my first match that I did in last September was did go viral, but it was nothing compared to the match I had at Spring Break. That was all over the place and made me known and the athlete that I am today.
All right. Now, on a search of YouTube, I saw a video that you submitted to WWE, and you were talking about, this was what you wanted to do. Did you ever hear back from WWE?
I don't know what you're referring to. I never.
Mustn't have been the right Dustin Thomas. Then I'll expunge that from the video, and nobody will ever know it existed. So let's talk about Double or Nothing. As I mentioned, we talked to a couple of guys leading into that interesting battle royal. Thoughts on how the match went, and what was it like getting in front of the MGM Grand and 10,000 plus folks?
Well, of course, it didn't go completely as planned. I didn't win, but it went well. It was the biggest crowd I've ever performed in, and it was just a different feel. And you feed off such energy, which is an experience that's hard to explain, and it's just amazing.
Absolutely. Now, a couple of those guys that were in the Battle Royal that weren't signed leading into it got signed afterwards. Can we expect to see you more often in AEW going forward?
As far as I know, I mean, you can always look at me anywhere because I'm everywhere. So, but as far as I know, not anything like permanently.
Well, I hope that does change. So after Double or Nothing, Jim Cornette did a podcast in a very Jim Cornette way and said some things yourself either. Did you ever hear what he had to say? And what do you think when you hear things like that? People that are just not even, giving it a chance, just these negative Nancys out there.
Well, some people get it and some people don't. I mean, Jim Cornette doesn't like the Young Bucks, so I mean, take it what he says with a grain of salt.
So there was a number of memorable exchanges in there with a lot of different guys, but I think the one that you crossed paths with the most that got the crowd going was MJF. Thoughts on the very hateable MJF persona, and do you hope to work with him again in the future?
Yeah, I mean, I hope so. It was very clear that me and him had quite the targeting during the match. So, yeah, I hope eventually I do end up getting to work against him.
So here we are in a brand new world in wrestling right now. 2019, when the history books are written, it's going to be the year that we really saw a change, and it's not even done happening yet with what's going to be happening with AEW going on TNT, the potential new Impact taping TV deal, WWE making changes, in their creative aspects. Where do you think we are in wrestling right now, and do you think it's going to
history, especially with there's so many places to work for performers, so all the talent that needs to be shined has plenty of places to go. It doesn't have to be one place like it was for quite some time. Now it's every other, or so many companies around the world.
Is it the internet that did this, or is it
so many
I was
different
talking to my
talents
friend
show off
who
the
used to be
skills
the
that they
co-host
have?
of the show the other day, and he says it's the internet, but his opinion was that it was so many years of maybe WWE being, I don't know, lackluster, that opened the door for people to be so hungry for anything that's so different.
I would say it's both. I think with WWE having, what was it, 15 years without a real competition, I think, yeah, like you say, fans were trying to strive for a new competition, and now that there's bigger companies and the actual competition with like AEW, but yeah, with the internet, I mean, AEW and the internet are like cohesive. I mean, they had being the elite basically absolutely. The creation.
All right, just a couple more questions. I kind of skipped this one when we were going over it, but getting in there to train. Obviously people talk about learning the ropes. Obviously learning the ropes for you was a little different than others. What did your trainers think when you decided you wanted to be a wrestler? And did they, how did they help adapt your style to what it is now?
I was lucky enough to get trained by someone who was really open-minded, Gino Caruso down with ECPW in New Jersey, and he was really open-minded about it. And once I got in there and started to show him that I could do all these things,
Very good. Are you from
it
New
was
Jersey?
really more about like how far we really could take it.
There you go.
No, I'm from
All right.
upstate
Well,
New York.
I'm going to
I
let
grew
you
up
go
there,
with that question,
near,
but
probably
before
an
I
hour
do, I
away
have a
from
favor to
Syracuse.
ask. Do you mind if I ask for a station ID? Just saying this is Dustin Thomas, and you are listening to the Wrestling Epicenter. Yeah, I could do the whole Wayne's World countdown thing if that's cool. Would that be good?
Sure. You want me to just do that now?
That's our name, yes, sir. And I'll count you down in 5. 4.
Yeah, the Wrestling Epicenter, is that what you're saying?
Hey, man, I want to tell you, we're still recording.
This is Dustin
gonna make the
Thomas, and you're
show.
watching the Wrestling
I really
Epicenter.
appreciate what you're doing, man. For all of us who have challenges, and again, different types of challenges, it really is cool to see someone like you succeed and really make a difference and go out there and blow people's minds and blow the expectations out of the water. It means a lot to me and a lot of others just like us. All right, man. Thank you so much. I'll let you go, and thank you for your time today.
Yeah, thanks, man. I appreciate it. It means a
Bye-bye.
lot.